My mother-in-law framed me in the delivery room. My boardroom revenge crowned my daughter Heir. On the day my daughter was born, my husband looked me in the eye and said, "She's not mine, and I don't want either of you." He walked out without looking back. But 15 years later, he showed up at my door begging for forgiveness, because the happiest day of my life became my worst nightmare in a matter of seconds. As I lay there in the hospital bed, still drained from bringing Victoria into this world, Alex's words cut through me like shards of glass. "She's not mine, and I don't want either of you." 15 years later, those words still echo in my mind. But now, as he stands at my doorstep, desperation painted across his aging face, I realize karma works in mysterious ways. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of empowerment, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us build this amazing community. Let's dive in. That day in the hospital feels etched into my soul like a tattoo I never wanted. The morning had started with such promise, my water breaking at dawn, Alex rushing me to the hospital, with what I thought was excitement in his eyes. Through 12 hours of labor, he held my hand, whispered encouragements, and I believed in our perfect little family to be. If only I had known those would be our last tender moments. Victoria came into this world at 7:43 in the evening. Her powerful cry filled the delivery room. The nurses cleaned her, wrapped her in a soft pink blanket, and placed her in my arms. She was perfect, a head full of dark hair, rosebud lips, and tiny fingers that curled around my pinky with surprising strength. I looked up at Alex, expecting to share in this moment of pure joy, but his face had transformed into something unrecognizable. He stood there, rigid and distant, staring at our daughter as if she were a stranger. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, growing wider with each passing second. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, clinical, devoid of the warmth I'd known for the past 5 years of marriage. "I've been going through your phone," he said, his words measured and sharp. "I saw your messages with James Cooper, my mentor, a man old enough to be my father, who had guided my career with nothing but professional interest." Before I could process the absurdity of his accusation, Alex continued, each word a dagger to my heart. "She's not mine, and I don't want either of you." He turned on his heel. His expensive leather shoes squeaked against the hospital floor. The sound of his footsteps faded, along with any remnants of our life together. The following hours passed in a blur of tears and disbelief. The nurses, sensing something terribly wrong, tried their best to comfort me. Dr. Rebecca Chin, Victoria's pediatrician, stayed well past her shift, holding my hand and assuring me that everything would be okay. But nothing felt okay. Claire Thompson, my best friend, arrived like a whirlwind of support, having driven through the night when she couldn't reach Alex on her phone. She took one look at my face and knew our world had imploded. Without a word, she climbed onto the hospital bed beside me, careful of my stitches and the tubes, and held me while I sobbed. That first night alone with Victoria was both terrifying and transformative. As the hospital quieted and darkness crept in, I watched my daughter sleep in her clear bassinet. She was so small, so innocent, completely unaware that her father had just denounced her very existence. With each tiny breath she took, something inside me hardened, not into bitterness, but into determination. In those quiet hours, as machines beeped softly and Victoria dreamed her newborn dreams, I made a silent vow. We would not just survive this betrayal, we would thrive despite it. Alex's cruel words would become the foundation of our strength, not our destruction. By morning, when the sun painted the hospital room in shades of pink and gold, I had cried my last tear for Alex Davidson. My daughter deserved better than a mother broken by betrayal. She deserved a warrior, and that's exactly what I would become. The discharge papers arrived with another blow. Alex had already contacted his lawyers. A manila envelope contained divorce papers, along with a check that felt like a slap in the face. The attached note read simply, "To help you get started, don't contact me." As Claire helped me pack our few belongings, Dr. Chin entered with Victoria's final checkup. Her kind eyes held something more than professional concern. She pulled me aside, her voice low but firm. "Mrs. Romano, I want you to know that I documented everything from last night. Mr. Davidson's behavior, his accusations, his abandonment. In my 30 years of practice, I've learned that medical records can become crucial evidence. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, I'm here." I thanked her, clutching Victoria closer to my chest. My daughter's warm weight anchored me to reality. reminding me that while one chapter of my life had ended brutally, another was just beginning. As Claire wheeled me toward the hospital exit, I held my head high. The same doors Alex had stormed through yesterday now opened to our future, a future he had foolishly discarded. Little did he know, his cruelest choice had stirred something in me. As Victoria's eyes opened to reveal deep brown pools of innocence, I knew she didn't need a father who could walk away so easily. She had me, and I would be enough. More than enough. We emerged into the bright morning light, leaving behind the shattered remains of one life and stepping into the unknown of another. The weight of Alex's betrayal still pressed against my chest, but alongside it grew something stronger, the first seeds of a revenge that would take 15 years to bloom. The first year was a blur of sleepless nights and relentless determination. Claire offered us her guest room, but I knew we needed our own space to heal and grow. Using Alex's generous check, I secured a modest one-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. The walls were thin, the furniture secondhand, but it was ours, a fortress where Victoria and I could begin again. Each morning I would watch the sunrise from our small balcony, Victoria nestled against my chest in her carrier, while sending out job applications. My previous position at Davidson Corp. Was no longer an option. Alex's family made sure of that. But James Cooper, my mentor, proved to be more than just a professional guide. "Olivia," he said during one of our coffee meetings, Victoria sleeping peacefully in her stroller, "what they did to you was unconscionable, but their mistake will be their downfall." He slid a business card across the table. "My friend's startup needs someone with your expertise. The pay isn't Davidson Corp. Level, but it's a ground floor opportunity." That opportunity became my lifeline. While other mothers spent their maternity leave bonding with their babies, I juggled client calls and spreadsheets with feeding schedules and diaper changes. The startup's flexible hours meant I could work from home most days, my laptop balanced on the armrest of the nursing chair, Victoria content in her bouncer beside my makeshift desk. Claire became our constant, dropping by with groceries and staying to fold laundry while I pitched to investors. Dr. Chin connected us with a network of single mothers, each with their own story of resilience. These women became our tribe, sharing childcare duties, hand-me-downs, and the unspoken understanding that sometimes strength comes from knowing you're not alone. Victoria thrived despite, or perhaps because of, our circumstances. Her first word wasn't mama but more, spoken with such determination as she reached for another spoonful of pureed carrots. By her first birthday, she was taking wobbly steps across our living room, her dark curls bouncing with each determined stride. She had Alex's height but my spirit, tackling each milestone with a persistence that made my heart swell. The startup grew, and with it, my role expanded. Late nights poring over contracts and market analyses paid off in promotions and equity shares. When Victoria was 3, we moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in a better school district. The day we packed up the old place, I found Alex's check stub tucked away in a drawer, never cashed. I'd kept it as a reminder, but we didn't need reminders of him anymore. James became a regular fixture in our lives, attending Victoria's preschool graduation and teaching her to play chess on Sunday afternoons. "She has your strategic mind," he'd say, watching her carefully plan each move. When he retired from active consulting, he handed me his client list. "They trust you more than me anyway." By Victoria's 5th birthday, I had launched my own consulting firm. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman Alex Davidson had discarded was now advising some of his competitors. Our new office space overlooked the Davidson Corp. Building, a daily reminder of how far we'd come and how far we still had to go. Victoria grew into a remarkable child. Her kindergarten teachers praised her emotional intelligence and leadership skills. While other children drew their families with stick figures holding hands, she created elaborate stories about a mother and daughter who could conquer anything together. During parent-teacher conferences, I'd catch other parents whispering about the single mom's kid, but their words had lost their sting. Success, as they say, is the best revenge. The unspoken promise to prove Alex wrong evolved into something more profound. We weren't just surviving, we were rewriting our story. Victoria's school projects won science fairs. Her soccer team celebrated championships. Each achievement felt like another brick in the foundation of our new life. One evening, as we sat on our new apartment's balcony sharing a pizza, our Friday night tradition, Victoria asked about him for the first time. "Mom, do other kids' dads just leave?" Her question hung in the air like suspended dust motes in sunlight. I pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. Sometimes people make choices they can't take back, I said carefully, but those choices often say more about them than about us. She nodded, wise beyond her years. Well, I think he made a pretty stupid choice, she declared, reaching for another slice of pizza. Because we're awesome. That night, after tucking Victoria into bed, I stood in our living room looking at the vision board we'd created together. Photos of our dream house, Victoria's academic goals, and my company's expansion plans covered the board. In the center, a quote read, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." As I got ready for bed, my phone buzzed with an email. A potential client wanted to meet, someone from Davidson Corp's board of directors. They were unhappy with their current leadership and seeking outside consultation. I smiled, setting my phone aside. The seeds of change were beginning to sprout. But that was a story for another day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new victories, and new opportunities to show the world what two determined Romano women could achieve. Alex's rejection had been our beginning, not our end. And as I drifted off to sleep, I could almost thank him for giving us the push we needed to soar. The meeting with Davidson Corp's board member changed everything. Over expensive coffee in a private club, Thomas Davidson, Alex's own father, revealed the web of lies that had ensnared us all those years ago. Margaret orchestrated everything, he confessed, his weathered hands trembling around his cup. She never thought you were good enough for Alex, but it went deeper than that. He slid a leather portfolio across the table, its contents spilled out like secrets too heavy to contain. Inside were emails, bank statements, and surveillance reports dating back to before Victoria's birth. Margaret Davidson, my former mother-in-law, had hired private investigators to fabricate evidence of an affair between James and me. The timestamps on the photos were manipulated, the text messages doctored, but most damning was the medical report she'd buried, one that questioned Alex's own fertility. She knew, Thomas continued, his voice heavy with regret. She knew Alex might not be able to father children. When you got pregnant, she saw her chance to get rid of you without revealing our family's weakness. The irony of his words felt like a physical blow. The portfolio contained more, evidence of Margaret's systematic dismantling of my reputation within Davidson Corp, the carefully planted rumors that forced my resignation, and the calculated pressure she'd applied to Alex. She'd played on his deepest insecurities, wielding doubt like a weapon until he believed her lies. "Why come forward now?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Thomas's expression confirmed it. The company's in trouble. Margaret's interference didn't stop with you. She's been manipulating Alex's business decisions for years, and now... He trailed off, sliding another document across the table, a financial report showing Davidson Corp's steady decline. That night, I spread the evidence across my home office floor, each piece fitting together like a malevolent puzzle. Claire sat with me, reading through the documents. Her gasps of disbelief punctuated the silence. "That woman is a monster," she whispered, holding up an email where Margaret gloated about her successful plan to separate Alex from his gold-digging wife and her bastard child. The truth burned through me like acid, but it also illuminated the path forward. I reached for my phone, dialing Dr. Chin's number. After all these years, she kept her promise. Every detail of that night in the hospital, meticulously documented, including Alex's behavior and the timing of his accusations. "I always knew something wasn't right," Dr. Chin said when I explained what I'd discovered. The way he changed so suddenly, it seemed orchestrated. "I've kept copies of everything, including the blood work from Victoria's birth, proof of paternity if you ever needed it." The pieces were falling into perfect, terrible alignment. James arrived the next morning, his face grim as he reviewed the documents. "This is more than just personal revenge, Olivia," he said. "This is corporate manipulation at the highest level. Margaret's actions haven't just hurt you and Victoria, they've endangered every Davidson Corp, employee and shareholder." Over the next few weeks, I built my case methodically. Each document was verified, each timestamp confirmed. The surveillance company Margaret had hired was more than willing to testify about their doctored photos when faced with legal consequences. Former employees came forward with their own stories of Margaret's manipulation. Victoria, now wise beyond her years, sensed the shift in our household's energy. "Something's happening," she said one evening, curled up beside me on the couch. "Something about him, isn't it?" I nodded, running my fingers through her dark curls. Yes, but it's more about his mother, your grandmother. She hurt a lot of people, including your father. Did she make him leave us? The question was direct, unflinching. She helped him make a terrible choice, I answered carefully, but he still made that choice. The final piece fell into place when Thomas delivered Margaret's private diaries. She documented everything, her fears about the Davidson legacy being tainted by common blood, her discovery of Alex's potential infertility, and her elaborate plan to remove me from the equation while keeping the truth about Alex's condition hidden. She kept them as trophies, Thomas said, his voice thick with shame. As I read through Margaret's careful plotting, how she'd orchestrated every detail from hiring the private investigators to planting doubts in Alex's mind, a cold clarity settled over me. This wasn't just about personal revenge anymore. This was about justice for every life she'd touched with her poisonous manipulation. I gathered my team, James, Dr. Chin, Claire, and a select group of lawyers who specialized in corporate malfeasance. Each piece of evidence was cataloged, each witness statement recorded. We built our case like a fortress, impenetrable and absolute. The truth had emerged from its long burial, but timing would be crucial. Margaret Davidson still held significant power within Davidson Corp., and Alex Felt remained under her influence. We needed to strike at the perfect moment when the company's vulnerability aligned with our strength. That moment was approaching faster than any of us could have anticipated. As I filed away the last of the evidence in my home safe, my phone lit up with a text from Thomas. Margaret's calling an emergency board meeting. Alex is back from London. It's starting. The stage was set. The players in position. 15 years of lies were about to unravel, and I would make sure every thread was pulled until nothing remained of Margaret Davidson's carefully constructed deception. #Victoria's blossoming, a force of nature. While the storm of corporate intrigue gathered force, Victoria blossomed into an extraordinary young woman. At 15, she stood tall and graceful. Her academic achievements matched her remarkable emotional intelligence. The years of careful nurturing and honest conversations about her father's absence hadn't broken her. They'd forged her into something remarkable. Her latest triumph came during the state science competition, where her research on corporate environmental impact earned her not just first place, but also the attention of several prestigious universities. As she accepted the award, her confident smile reminded me so much of my own hard-won strength that my heart nearly burst with pride. "Mom," she said that evening, her medal catching the light as she sat cross-legged on our kitchen counter, "I used Davidson Corp. as one of my case studies." Her eyes held a mixture of defiance and uncertainty. I wanted to understand the company he chose over us. I watched her fidget with the medal's ribbon, seeing both the child she'd been and the woman she was becoming. "What did you learn?" "Their environmental record is terrible," she replied, her voice taking on the passionate tone I'd grown to associate with her discoveries. "But more than that, their decision-making patterns show a clear disconnect between leadership and ethical responsibility. It's like they're stuck in the past while the world moves forward." Her insights struck me like lightning. Without knowing the full story, Victoria had identified the rot at Davidson Corp's core, the same corruption that Margaret had nurtured for years. But Victoria's achievements weren't limited to academics. On the soccer field, she developed into a formidable team captain, leading her squad to the regional championships. During matches, I'd sometimes catch glimpses of other parents nudging each other, whispering about the single mom's daughter. But now their tones held admiration rather than pity. Our bond had grown stronger with each passing year. Our Friday pizza nights evolved into deep discussions about philosophy, science, and the future. Victoria's questions about her father became less frequent but more profound, showing her growing understanding of human complexity. "Do you think people can really change?" she asked one evening, as we shared our traditional pepperoni and mushroom pizza on the balcony. The city lights twinkled below us like earthbound stars. "I believe they can," I answered carefully, "but change has to come from within. It can't be forced or bought." She nodded, contemplating the city skyline. "I used to dream about him coming back, not because I needed a father, but because I wanted to understand how someone could walk away from their own child." The maturity in her words made my chest tighten. "Sometimes people make choices based on lies they believe about themselves and others," I said, thinking of Margaret's manipulation. Victoria turned to me, her eyes sharp with understanding. Like the lies someone told him about us? I shouldn't have been surprised by her perception. She'd inherited my analytical mind and had likely pieced together more than I realized from overheard conversations and careful observation. At school, Victoria had developed a reputation for standing up for other children from non-traditional families. She turned her own experience into a source of strength for others, starting a support group for students dealing with absent parents or family challenges. You know what's funny, Mom? She said during one of our weekend brunches. Some of my friends feel sorry for me because I don't have a dad. They don't understand that I have something better. I have you. And you showed me that love means staying, even when it's hard. The shadow of Alex's abandonment had gradually faded from our daily lives, replaced by the warm light of our shared achievements and unwavering support for each other. Victoria didn't define herself by his absence but by her own presence in the world, strong, compassionate, and fiercely intelligent. As I watched her practice her valedictorian speech for the upcoming honor ceremony, I realized that our journey had created something beautiful from something broken. Victoria wasn't just surviving without a father, she was thriving because she understood her own worth wasn't determined by his choices. "Mom," she called out, breaking my reverie, "do you think we should invite the Davidsons to the ceremony? Grandfather Thomas has been sending those emails." The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with an incoming call, Thomas Davidson's name flashing on the screen. The time for keeping Victoria separate from the Davidson drama was ending. She deserved to know the whole truth before it exploded into our lives. "Sweetheart," I said, silencing the phone, "there's something you need to know about your grandmother Margaret and why your father really left us that day in the hospital." Victoria straightened in her chair, her posture reflecting the poise she developed over years of facing challenges head-on. "I'm ready, Mom. Tell me everything." The truth was about to change our lives again, but this time we would face it together, stronger than ever, prepared for whatever storm was coming our way. Before I could begin explaining everything to Victoria, our doorbell rang with an urgency that made both of us jump. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I saw him, Alex Davidson, 15 years older but unmistakable, standing at our door with shoulders slumped in defeat. Victoria's sharp intake of breath told me she'd recognized him too. "Is that—" "Yes," I answered, my hand automatically reaching for hers. "That's your father." She squared her shoulders, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "Let him in," she said firmly. "I want to hear what he has to say." When I opened the door, the man before me barely resembled the powerful executive who'd walked out of that hospital room 15 years ago. Alex's designer suit hung loose on his frame. His face was gaunt and pale. His eyes, once sharp with ambition, now held a desperate plea. "Olivia," he whispered. Then his gaze shifted to Victoria, and tears welled in his eyes. "Victoria, you look just like your mother." Victoria stood tall beside me, her presence steady and strong. "That's the greatest compliment anyone could give me," she replied, her voice cool but not cruel. We led him to our living room, where his eyes darted around, taking in the evidence of our successful life without him, Victoria's academic awards, photos of our travels, the view from our luxury apartment windows. "I have cancer," he announced without preamble, his hands trembling slightly. "Stage 4 pancreatic. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less." The silence that followed felt electric. Victoria's hand tightened in mine. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," Alex continued, his voice breaking. "I don't deserve it. But I need you both to know the truth, about my mother, about that day, about everything." "We already know," Victoria said quietly. "About grandmother Margaret's manipulation, the lies, all of it." Alex's head snapped up in surprise, his eyes darting between us. "How?" "Your father," I explained. "Thomas came to me with everything, the doctored photos, the medical reports about your fertility, the diaries, all of it." He crumpled then, decades of carefully constructed walls collapsing. "I was a coward," he admitted. "Mother showed me those photos, told me about your supposed affair with James, and I believed her. I wanted to believe her because I was terrified the baby might not be mine, that I couldn't father children. It was easier to run than face the truth." Victoria moved forward, her analytical mind clearly processing each piece of information. "Did you ever think about us? Wonder about me?" "Every day," he whispered. I watched from afar. Your science fair victories, soccer championships, everything. Mother kept tabs on you both, though not for the reasons I thought. When I discovered her true motivations recently, it destroyed me more than the cancer. I watched my daughter process this information, seeing the complexity of emotions play across her face. She'd inherited my ability to read between the lines, to see the larger picture forming. The company, she said suddenly. That's why you're really here, isn't it? It's not just about the cancer. Alex's face registered surprise, then a ghost of pride. You really are brilliant, just like your mother. Yes, the company is imploding. Mother's decisions over the years, her manipulation of the board, everything's coming apart. I need help fixing what she broke before I die. And do you think we can help? I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. He nodded. The board is ready to remove Mother, but they need evidence of her manipulation. Evidence I know you have. He hesitated, looking at Victoria. The company needs an heir, someone with the Davidson name but none of the corruption. Someone who could restore integrity to the corporation. Victoria stood up abruptly, pacing the room with the same energy she used when solving complex problems. So, you abandoned us because you believed grandmother's lies about my paternity, and now you want us to help save the company and preserve your legacy? Alex flinched at her direct assessment. I know I have no right to ask anything of either of you. You're right, Victoria said. Then, surprising us both, she added, but I'll help anyway, not for you, not even for the company, but for all the employees who'll lose their jobs if Davidson Corp. fails. I've researched your company extensively. Did you know that? A tear slid down Alex's cheek as he shook his head. I'll help, she continued, but on my terms. And those terms start with you telling me everything, every detail about why you chose to believe grandmother's lies instead of trusting Mom's love. She turned to me, her eyes seeking approval. I nodded, pride swelling in my chest at her strength, her wisdom, her capacity for conditional forgiveness while maintaining firm boundaries. Alex looked between us, seeing perhaps for the first time the unshakable bond that had formed in his absence. I'll tell you everything, he promised, and then I'd like to tell you about my diagnosis, about what happens next. Victoria sat back down beside me, her posture regal. Start talking, she commanded, sounding every bit the corporate heir she might become. We have a lot to discuss before we decide anything. #the plan, laying bare the empire. For the next 2 hours, Alex laid bare the crumbling empire of Davidson Corporation. His hands shook as he pulled document after document from his briefcase, each paper revealing another crack in the foundation his mother had corrupted. The company's falling apart, he explained, spreading financial reports across our coffee table. Mother's decisions weren't just personal vendettas. They were systematic destruction disguised as traditional business practices. Victoria leaned forward, her analytical mind already processing the information. These environmental violations alone could sink the company, she noted, pointing to a particularly damning report. I referenced some of these in my research paper, but I had no idea how deep it went. That's just the surface, Alex continued, pulling out more documents. The real bombshell is this. He handed over a medical file, his hands trembling more violently than before. My complete fertility workup from before your birth. Mother buried it, used it to manipulate me, but she didn't destroy it. The report confirmed what Thomas had already told us. Alex had severe fertility issues. The chances of him fathering a child naturally were less than 1%. Victoria was, in scientific terms, a miracle. When Mother showed me those doctored photos of you and James, Alex said, looking at me, she coupled them with fake medical reports suggesting Victoria couldn't be mine. I was too much of a coward to question it, too afraid to face the truth about my own inadequacies. Victoria's face remained composed, but I saw her hands clench slightly. So you chose to believe the worst about Mom rather than face your own fears? Alex's shoulders slumped further. Yes, it was the biggest mistake of my life. He gestured to the scattered papers. And now everything's unraveling. Mother's manipulation extended far beyond our family. She's been systematically destroying anyone she saw as a threat to her control of the company. The board meeting tomorrow, I interjected. What's really happening? Mother's making her final play, Alex explained. She's trying to force through a merger that would essentially dissolve the company's independent operations. She knows I'm dying, and she's planning to sell everything before the truth about her actions comes to light. Victoria stood up, pacing the room as she processed the information. "You need more than just our help exposing grandmother's manipulation," she said, suddenly turning to face her father. "You need an heir, someone to take over who can't be controlled by her." Alex nodded slowly. "The company bylaws require a blood relative to maintain controlling interest. Without that, everything gets divided among the board members. Mother's been counting on that. She has most of them in her pocket. But if Victoria's paternity is confirmed," I began, seeing the pieces fall into place. "She becomes the legitimate heir to Davidson Corp," Alex finished. "And with her environmental research and ethical stance, she could rebuild the company into something better than it ever was." Victoria stopped pacing, her expression unreadable. "You abandoned us, believed the worst about Mom, and now you want me to save your company?" "No," Alex replied, his voice breaking. "I want to give you the chance to save thousands of jobs, to transform a corrupt company into something meaningful. It's not about saving my legacy. It's about giving you the opportunity to build your own." The irony was palpable. Margaret's manipulation had been aimed at preventing exactly this scenario, a child of mine inheriting the Davidson empire. Now her own actions had created the perfect storm for it to happen. "The medical records proving your fertility issues," I said slowly, "combined with Dr. Chin's documentation from Victoria's birth and the evidence of Margaret's manipulation, would be enough to prove Victoria's legitimate claim to the company." Alex confirmed it, and with Thomas willing to testify about Mother's actions. Victoria moved to the window, staring out at the city skyline. "The company's annual environmental impact report is due next month," she said, almost to herself. "With full access to their records, I could implement the changes I outlined in my research paper." Alex's face lit up with a hint of pride. "You've already studied the company's problems. You understand what needs to be done better than anyone." "I need time to think," Victoria announced, turning back to face us. "This isn't just about exposing grandmother or saving the company. This is about choosing to take on a responsibility I never asked for." Alex nodded, standing slowly with visible effort. "The board meets at 10 tomorrow morning. I know it's not much time, but—" He paused, swaying slightly. I recognized the signs of fatigue in his gaunt face. Despite everything, seeing him so weakened by illness stirred something in me. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps understanding. "We'll let you know our decision in the morning," I said firmly. "You should rest." As he headed toward the door, he turned back one last time. "Victoria," he said softly, "regardless of what you decide, I want you to know that walking away from you was the biggest regret of my life. You've become everything I could have hoped for in a daughter, and I had nothing to do with it. That's my burden to bear." After he left, Victoria and I sat in silence, the scattered papers telling their tale of corruption, manipulation, and the price of success built on lies. "Mom," Victoria finally said, "I think I know what I want to do." The determination in her voice told me that whatever she decided, Margaret Davidson's carefully constructed world was about to change forever. #the boardroom, justice served. The Davidson Corp. Boardroom fell silent as Victoria and I walked in at precisely 9:55 in the morning. Margaret Davidson's face, usually frozen in a mask of superiority, cracked momentarily at the sight of her granddaughter. Thomas sat beside her, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. Alex was already there, looking even more haggard than the night before. The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, clearly aware that something momentous was about to unfold. "What is the meaning of this?" Margaret demanded, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the edge of the mahogany table. "This is a private board meeting." Victoria stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the table. "Actually, grandmother, I have every right to be here. In fact, after today, I'll have more right than you." James Cooper entered behind us with our legal team, each carrying their own documentation. Dr. Chin followed, clutching a medical file that would shatter Margaret's carefully constructed lies. "I move to begin this meeting," Thomas announced, his voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "We have some urgent matters to discuss regarding the company's leadership." Margaret's laugh was brittle. "If this is about Alex's ridiculous claims—" "This," Victoria interrupted, her voice clear and confident, "is about years of manipulation, fraud, and corporate malfeasance. Would you like to see the evidence chronologically or by severity of offense?" I watched my daughter, pride swelling in my chest, as she began methodically presenting the case we prepared. She started with the medical records proving Alex's fertility issues, followed by Dr. Chin's documentation from her birth. "And here," Victoria continued, pulling out Margaret's own diaries, "we have your detailed plans to separate my parents using falsified evidence. That alone is grounds for criminal charges, but it's just the beginning." The board members leaned forward as Victoria revealed the extent of Margaret's corruption. Environmental violations covered up, competitors sabotaged, employees silenced. Each revelation landed like a physical blow. "You foolish girl," Margaret spat, her composure finally cracking. "You have no idea what it takes to maintain a company of this magnitude. Everything I did was to protect our legacy." "Your legacy," Victoria replied calmly, "is one of destruction, but mine will be different." She turned to address the board directly. "As the legitimate heir to Davidson Corp., I propose an immediate restructuring beginning with the removal of Margaret Davidson from all positions of authority." The legal proceedings moved swiftly after that. Margaret's attempts to fight back crumbled as more evidence emerged. Thomas's testimony about her years of manipulation proved devastating, especially when coupled with statements from former employees she'd silenced. All those in favor of removing Margaret Davidson from the board and installing Victoria Romano Davidson as heir apparent. Thomas called the vote. Hands rose around the table, some eager, others resigned, but all decisive. Margaret's face contorted with rage as she realized her defeat. "You can't do this," she hissed. "I built this company." "No," Alex spoke up, his voice weak but clear. "Dad built this company. You just corrupted it, and now Victoria will rebuild it." As security arrived to escort Margaret from the building, she turned to me with venom in her eyes. "You planned this from the beginning, didn't you? Seduced my son, trapped him with a baby." "That's enough," Victoria cut in, her voice steel. "You've lost, grandmother. The truth has finally come out. Leave with whatever dignity you have left." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of signatures and legal proceedings. Victoria was officially named heir to Davidson Corp., with immediate voting power on the board. Her first act was to launch a complete environmental audit and establish a fund for employees who'd been wrongfully terminated under Margaret's regime. As the boardroom emptied, Alex remained, looking both exhausted and relieved. "Victoria," he said softly, "I know this doesn't make up for the past." "No, it doesn't," she agreed. "But the future is what matters now. I'll need your help during the transition while you're able. There's a lot to fix." I watched them begin discussing the company's immediate needs, seeing hints of the relationship that could have been. The irony wasn't lost on me. Margaret's desperate attempts to keep Victoria from her inheritance had ultimately secured it. Hashtag a new legacy, transformation over revenge. Later that evening, as Victoria and I sat in our favorite pizza place celebrating, she looked at me thoughtfully. "You know, Mom, Grandmother was right about one thing. You did plan this from the beginning, just not the way she meant." "Oh?" I raised an eyebrow. "You planned for me to be strong enough to handle whatever life threw at me. You planned for me to understand right from wrong. You planned for me to be capable of standing up for what I believe in." She smiled. "And now we can use that strength to help others." The press would have a field day with the story, the abandoned wife and daughter returning to take control of the company that had rejected them. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the look of purpose in Victoria's eyes as she outlined her plans for Davidson Corp's future. Justice, it seemed, had finally been served, and it tasted better than revenge ever could. 1 year after the boardroom confrontation, Victoria stood at the podium of Davidson Corp's annual shareholders meeting. The audience was packed with employees, investors, and media representatives, all eager to hear from the young woman who had transformed the company's reputation. "A year ago," she began, her voice clear and confident, "this company stood at a crossroads. Today, I'm proud to announce that Davidson Corp has not only survived but evolved into something remarkable." The presentation screen behind her displayed the company's achievements: a 40% reduction in environmental impact, the establishment of the Davidson Romano Foundation for Educational Excellence, and groundbreaking initiatives in sustainable business practices. Alex sat in the front row, noticeably thinner, but his eyes bright with pride. The aggressive cancer treatments had bought him more time than expected, enough to see his daughter's vision taking shape. Thomas sat beside him, finally free from Margaret's shadow. She had chosen to accept a plea deal, avoiding prison but forever barred from any involvement in corporate affairs. But our greatest achievement, Victoria continued, isn't measured in profit margins or stock prices. It's measured in lives changed. She gestured to the side of the stage, where a group of former employees who'd been wrongfully terminated under Margaret's leadership stood. These individuals have not only been reinstated, but are now leading our new ethical compliance division. I watched from the wings, remembering that frightened young mother in the hospital room 15 years ago. If someone had told me then that this would be our future, that my daughter would rebuild the very company that had rejected us, I wouldn't have believed it. After the presentation, Victoria launched the Davidson Romano Scholarship Fund, dedicated to supporting children from single-parent households. Every child deserves the chance to reach their potential, she announced, her eyes finding mine in the crowd, and every parent deserves support in helping them get there. The reception afterward was held in the renovated company headquarters. The building, once a monument to corporate excess, now featured solar panels, green spaces, and a childcare center for employees. "You've exceeded every expectation," Alex said to Victoria as we shared a quiet moment away from the crowds. His voice was weaker now, the cancer taking its toll despite the treatments. "I only wish I had been there to see you grow into this amazing woman." Victoria took his hand. Their relationship had evolved into something neither of them had expected. "You're here now," she said simply, "and your mistakes helped shape who I became. Sometimes the hardest lessons leave the most lasting impact." Later that evening, as Victoria and I walked through the rooftop garden she'd insisted on installing, she shared her latest vision. "I want to expand the foundation," she said, plucking a leaf from one of the herbs growing in the community plots. "Not just scholarships, but comprehensive support for families going through what we did." "Your grandmother would hate it," I smiled, using Davidson money to help the people she looked down on. "That's exactly why it's perfect." Victoria laughed, then growing serious. "You know, Mom, all those years ago, she thought she was protecting a legacy. She never understood that true legacy isn't about preserving the past, it's about building a better future." The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of promise. Below us, employees tended to their garden plots, children played in the new playground, and the massive Davidson Corp. logo now shared space with solar panels and growing vines. "We've come full circle," I mused, remembering the night Victoria was born. "From that hospital room to this rooftop." "Not quite full circle," Victoria corrected, pulling out a document from her jacket. "More like an upward spiral. Look at this." It was a proposal to rename the company. Davidson Romano Corp. would become its official title, acknowledging both sides of Victoria's heritage and the strength that came from each. "What do you think?" she asked, watching my expression. I thought about the journey, the tears, the struggles, the triumphs, how every moment of pain had led to this transformation. "I think it's perfect," I replied. "It honors where you came from and points to where you're going." As night fell over the city, lights twinkled on in office windows below. Somewhere in those buildings, other mothers were facing their own battles, other daughters were finding their strength. But now they would have somewhere to turn, someone to light the way. Victoria's legacy wouldn't be built on revenge or retribution, but on transformation and hope. She had taken the broken pieces of her father's abandonment and her grandmother's manipulation and built something beautiful, a testament to the power of resilience, the strength of truth, and the enduring bond between a mother and daughter who refused to be broken. In the end, the greatest revenge wasn't in destroying what had hurt us, but in creating something so much better in its place. And as I watched my daughter lead the way into this new chapter, I knew that some endings aren't really endings at all. They're just beautiful beginnings in disguise.